The city of Harbor City sat under heavy rain with neon signs glowing through the dark like tired stars. The streets were wet, the sidewalks were crowded, and the whole place seemed to hold its breath before every big fight night. In the center of that restless world stood Marcus Vale, a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and a sharp smile that could fill any room. He was the city's fastest rising boxer, and he wanted more than money or applause. He wanted respect because people kept calling him flashy, loud, and too confident to last. That hurt him because he knew how hard he worked, and he feared that one bad night could erase everything. Around him stood the people who mattered most. Frank Monroe was a white man with gray hair, a broad frame, and a calm face that made him look like a teacher and a soldier at the same time. He trained Marcus with strict patience because he believed discipline could turn talent into legend. Lena Vale was Marcus's older sister, a black woman with long brown hair, steady eyes, and a serious voice. She handled his money, kept him grounded, and worried that the world was trying to swallow him whole. Eddie Cole was Marcus's best friend, a Latino man with curly black hair, a quick grin, and a loyal heart. He traveled with Marcus, joked with him, and reminded him that confidence was not a crime. The danger around them was clear from the start. Victor Shaw, the cold promoter with slick blonde hair and a sharp suit, wanted to own Marcus's future. He promised fame, but only if Marcus obeyed every demand and played the role Victor wrote for him. At the same time, Sharon Pike, a hard-eyed reporter with red hair and a hungry notebook, kept printing stories that made Marcus look reckless and unstable. She said the public had a right to know if Marcus was a champion or just a loud promise waiting to crack. But the deepest threat was not in the papers or the boardrooms. It came as a strange phantom of doubt, a dark figure that Marcus alone could see when the lights went low and the crowd turned loud. It followed him into mirrors, into hallways, and even into the ring ropes before a fight. It never touched him, but it whispered the same lies again and again, telling him he was one mistake away from collapse. Frank had seen that look in fighters before, but never in a man who moved with Marcus's fire. He told Marcus that every great champion faces a ghost made of fear, and the only way to beat it is to keep moving when the heart shakes. Marcus wanted to believe that. Still, on the night before his biggest match, he sat alone in his dressing room, listened to the rain strike the window, and wondered if the whole city was waiting to watch him fail. The next morning, the arena rose like a giant metal fortress in the middle of downtown Harbor City. Fans packed the seats, cameras flashed, and every reporter waited for one story only: Marcus Vale's fall or Marcus Vale's rise. His opponent that night was Damian Cross, a tall white man with black hair, stone-cold eyes, and a body built like a locked gate. Damian was known for crushing faster fighters by dragging them into long, punishing rounds. He was not cruel for no reason. He fought because Victor Shaw had promised him a path to the title and a future as the face of boxing, but only if Marcus was made to look weak. Victor wanted control of the sport, and Marcus's popularity threatened that control. If Marcus won his own way, the public would follow him instead of the safe, polished champions Victor preferred. That was why Victor fed the press, pushed Sharon's stories, and tried to corner Marcus with fear. Frank saw the trap clearly, but he also knew Marcus had to walk into it himself. In the locker room, Marcus wrapped his hands and listened as Lena told him not to let other people define his worth. Eddie laughed softly and said the crowd had paid to see a show, and Marcus had always known how to give them one. That brought a small smile, but then the phantom appeared in the corner of the mirror. It looked like Marcus, only darker, slower, and bent by worry. It whispered that Damian was stronger, that the crowd was turning, and that Victor had already won. Marcus flinched and Frank stepped close. He did not deny the fear. He told Marcus that doubt was real, but it was also noisy, and noise could be drowned out by rhythm. Then he tapped Marcus's chest and told him to trust his feet, his breath, and his smile. The fight began under bright lights and roaring sound. Damian came forward with heavy pressure, trying to break Marcus's timing. The first rounds were hard, and the crowd gasped when Damian landed clean shots that pushed Marcus backward. Sharon watched from ringside and wrote fast, ready to call the night a failure if Marcus stumbled. Victor smiled in the front row, sure that Marcus would panic. But Marcus did not panic. He moved, dipped, slipped, and answered with fast combinations that drew the crowd closer. He spoke to Damian with quick words, then laughed after a clean strike, and that laughter seemed to anger his opponent more than any punch. Marcus's style was not just speed, it was rhythm. He used the ring like music, stepping side to side, changing angles, and refusing to stand still long enough for fear to catch him. Still, the phantom hovered every time he got cornered. It whispered during the breaks between rounds, telling him that one mistake would end everything. By the middle of the fight, Marcus was breathing harder, and even Frank looked worried. Damien had learned to cut off the ring, and the pressure kept building. Then came the twist that none of them expected. During a quiet moment near the ropes, Eddie spotted Victor talking to one of the officials near the side entrance, and Lena saw Sharon receive an envelope from Victor's assistant. Frank had already suspected something was wrong with the scorecards, but now he understood the shape of the trap. Victor had not only wanted Damien to win, he had also planned to twist the public story afterward, no matter who won, so Marcus could be painted as unstable, arrogant, and finished. The real fight was bigger than the ring. It was for Marcus's future, his voice, and his right to own his own story. When Marcus learned this between rounds, the pain in his face changed. It was no longer only fear. It was anger, clear and focused. He looked at the phantom again, and for the first time, he did not see it as a monster. He saw it as every lie he had ever been handed. So he stood up, loosened his shoulders, and told Frank he was done fighting like a man trying to please the room. He was going to fight like a man who belonged to himself. The final rounds came like thunder rolling over steel. Damien attacked with everything he had, trying to force Marcus into the ropes and crush his pace. The crowd rose as both men traded hard, fast, exhausting blows that shook the whole arena. But Marcus had changed. He stopped chasing approval, stopped looking for the perfect moment, and started trusting the beat inside him. He moved with sharper balance, slid under Damien's heavy attacks, and answered with clean counters that made the champion stumble for the first time. The Phantom came back one last time, huge and dark in Marcus's mind, and it shouted that he was tired, that the crowd would forget him, and that failure was already waiting outside the doors. Marcus heard it, but he did not freeze. He smiled instead, a small and steady smile, and that smile meant he was free. He remembered Frank's voice, Lena's warning, Eddie's faith, and every lonely morning when he trained until his legs shook. He also remembered the people in the city who had been told they were too loud, too proud, or too different to matter. In that moment, Marcus understood that his fight had never been only for himself. It was for anyone who had ever been told to shrink. So he stepped forward and launched a final rush of speed, timing, and fearless rhythm. Damien tried to hold him off, but Marcus kept coming, changing angles until the bigger man lost the center of the ring. The arena exploded with sound as Marcus took control. Victor's face tightened, Sharon lowered her pen, and even the officials could not hide what they were seeing. The bell finally rang, and Damien stood back, overwhelmed but still upright, while Marcus lifted his gloves and breathed hard under the lights. The crowd did not wait for the judges to tell them what they already knew. They were standing for Marcus Vale. Yet the story did not end with that single victory, because Victor still had power and the Phantom had not vanished from the world. In the quiet after the fight, Frank told Marcus that the next battle would be outside the arena, where lawyers, cameras, and promises could be even crueler than fists. Lena hugged her brother and said the truth was now moving faster than Victor's lies. Eddie grinned and said the city had a new heartbeat. Marcus looked back at the dark tunnel leading from the ring, and for a brief second he thought he saw the Phantom watching from the shadows, no longer as a giant enemy, but as a reminder that doubt would always try to return. He did not fear it as much now. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to keep your rhythm while fear was still nearby. Above him, the lights burned bright, the rain kept falling on the roof, and the crowd roared for the man who had turned pressure into power. But somewhere beyond the arena, Victor Shaw was already planning his next move, and Sharon Pike was already deciding which truth to print first. Marcus knew the night had changed everything, yet he also knew the hardest part of his journey was still ahead, waiting just beyond the bright line between the ring and the world. And as the last echo of the bell faded, he stepped forward into that unknown, ready for the next round. The night outside the arena was cold, bright, and full of noise, while neon signs blinked over wet streets and tired fans pushed toward the subway. Inside that glow, Marcus Vale stood in his colorful boxing trunks, his hand wrapped still tight, his athletic body sore but steady, and his bright eyes fixed on the road ahead. He was a young black man with short black hair and a confident smile, but tonight that smile held more weight than pride, because he had just turned pressure into power and shown the crowd that he was not easy to break. Frank Monroe walked beside him, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy frame, and calm eyes, wearing his simple training shirt and dark pants with a whistle hanging at his neck. Frank had trained Marcus with hard rules and patient care, and he knew this was not the end of the fight, only the start of a much bigger one. Lena Vale waited at the curb in her tailored coat and practical shoes, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of composed face that could calm a storm or start one. She was Marcus's sister and manager, and she wanted the same thing he wanted, which was freedom, but she also knew freedom had a price. Eddie Cole stood near the car with his warm grin and energetic posture, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a casual jacket over his team shirt, and he kept looking back at the arena doors like he expected trouble to walk out at any moment. The trouble was already moving toward them because Victor Shaw had seen the crowd roar, had seen Marcus become impossible to ignore, and had decided that if he could not control Marcus by talent alone, then he would control him with contracts, cameras, and pressure. Victor was a cold white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a polished smile, dressed in an expensive dark suit with a silk tie and a silver watch, and he believed every person in the city had a price if he could find it. He wanted Marcus because a rising fighter could fill seats, sell stories, and make Victor even richer. That was the heart of the conflict now, simple and dangerous. Victor wanted ownership, Marcus wanted his own life, and if Marcus lost this battle, his future would belong to someone else. Not far away, Sharon Pike watched from the edge of the press line, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, her reporter's coat hanging open as she gripped her notebook like a weapon. Sharon wanted the truth, but she also wanted attention, and she had already begun deciding which version of the night would make her name travel faster than honesty ever could. She was not evil in the same way Victor was, but she was still dangerous, because a story twisted for fame could wound just as deeply as a punch. Marcus felt all of that around him, even before anyone spoke, and the feeling returned the old shadow he had been fighting for years, the shadow that looked like him and moved like a thought he did not want. In broken glass near the arena steps, the Phantom of Doubt appeared for the first time that night. A smoky dark figure with the same face shape as Marcus, glowing empty eyes, and a looming human form that seemed to lean out of the dark corners. It did not speak, but Marcus knew what it meant, because it always came when fear tried to grow roots in his mind. It whispered without words that fame would fade, that Victor would use him, that Sharon would twist him, and that one bad night could end everything he had built. Marcus stared back at it, and for a moment his confident smile slipped, because even a strong heart can shake when the world suddenly opens wider than the ring. Frank noticed the change right away, as a good trainer always does, and he put one steady hand on Marcus's shoulder. Frank told him that pressure was only power with a hard face, and that the man who could stand under it without running would always have another round left. Lena, who had been watching the reporters, stepped in beside them and told Marcus that Victor had already sent a lawyer and a contract packet to the back office, which meant the promoter was moving fast and wanted Marcus boxed in before he could think. Eddie added that cameras had been set up across the street, and that Sharon's newspaper crew was already asking fans the wrong questions, turning a victory into a rumor before the smoke had even cleared. The first real escalation came when Victor approached under the streetlights, smiling as if he owned the sidewalk, and he spoke in a soft voice that made his threat sound polite. He said Marcus had made a powerful impression and that the city loved a fighter who could rise from pain, but now it was time to make that success official. He wanted Marcus to sign with him, take his fights, take his schedule, take his image, and let Victor handle everything else. Victor promised money, fame, and protection, but his eyes never changed, and Marcus could see the truth under the shine. Victor did not want a partner, he wanted a product. Marcus felt the Phantom of Doubt stir again, and this time the shadow seemed taller because the offer carried a real danger. If Marcus refused, Victor could freeze his career, block his matches, and turn the sports world against him. If Marcus accepted, he might win more often, but he would lose the chance to choose his own path. Sharon, hearing enough from the edge of the group, moved closer and tried to force the moment into a headline. She asked Marcus if his rise was real courage or just lucky timing, and she asked Victor if he was now the man who would make Marcus a star. Her pen moved fast, and she did not care that her questions could push people into corners. Marcus saw how both of them used the night differently, and he finally understood the larger fight ahead. The ring had only shown his power. The world now wanted to test his name. Before Marcus could answer, the arena doors burst open behind them, and Damian Cross stepped out like a wall built for damage. Damien was a tall white man with black hair, broad shoulders, and a rigid, intimidating stare, wearing black boxing trunks and gloves even though the fight was over. He had been Victor's most reliable heavyweight opponent, a man trained to crush anyone who challenged the promoter's control, and he had been sent to send a message. Damien did not speak much, but his silence was heavy, and when he planted himself between Marcus and the car, everyone understood what Victor was really saying. Sign, obey, or be overwhelmed. The crowd outside began to notice, and phones rose into the air. Frank stepped forward at once, not to fight, but to hold the line, and Lena pulled Eddie back before the situation could explode. Marcus, still sore from the ring, felt the full weight of the moment, because this was no longer about a title or a trophy. It was about whether he would let fear choose his future. He looked at Damien, then at Victor, then at Sharon, and the phantom of doubt appeared again in the reflection of a dark bus window, wearing Marcus's face and waiting for him to give up. Then Marcus did something that changed the night. He reached into his robe pocket, took out the contract Victor had sent, and tore it cleanly in half without raising his voice. The crowd around them went silent for one sharp second, and even Victor's smile cracked a little. Marcus told Victor that he would fight anyone in the ring, but he would not be owned outside it. He told Sharon that if she wanted the truth, she could print that he was still standing and still making his own choices. He told Frank, Lena, and Eddie that he was scared, but he was not lost. That admission mattered because it was the first time Marcus had said fear out loud instead of hiding it behind charm. Frank gave a small, proud nod because he knew the boy was beginning to become a man. Lena breathed out slowly because she had spent years protecting Marcus from people like Victor, and now Marcus was protecting himself too. Eddie lifted his chin and smiled because loyalty had just become a louder force than money. Victor, however, was not finished, and his calm face returned as if nothing had happened. He told Marcus that tearing paper did not tear power, and that tomorrow the city would hear a different version of this moment, one with Marcus painted as reckless, ungrateful, and hard to work with. Sharon wrote that line down immediately because she could already see the shape of a bigger story forming. That was the twist Marcus did not expect, and it made the danger sharper. The battle was not only physical and not even only financial. It was about who controlled the truth. As Victor stepped back into the darkness with Damien beside him, he left one final threat hanging in the air, saying that the next match would prove whether Marcus was a hero or a mistake. Then he vanished into the night, while Sharon stayed behind with her notebook, watching Marcus as if she had just found the center of a storm. Marcus stood under the flickering lights, sore, angry, and awake in a new way, and the phantom of doubt hovered at the edge of the alley, thinner now but still present, because fear does not vanish just because a person speaks bravely once. Yet something in Marcus had changed. He no longer believed strength meant hiding weakness. He understood now that the ring was only one place where he would be tested, and that the hardest fight was learning how to stay himself when everyone around him wanted a piece of him. Frank told him they would train harder in the morning. Lena said she would handle the legal mess before sunrise. Eddie promised he would keep the team together no matter what headlines came out. Marcus listened to them all, and for the first time that night, the future did not feel like a trap. It felt like a road with danger on both sides, but also with space to move forward. As the car pulled away from the arena, the city lights slid across Marcus's face, and he looked out at the streets ahead with a calmer expression than before. He had entered the night as a fighter who knew how to win rounds. He was leaving it as a man who had begun to understand what winning really cost. And somewhere behind him, Victor was already planning the next pressure point, Sharon was already shaping her headline, and Damien was already waiting for the next order. Marcus saw all of it coming, but now he saw himself too, and that made the dark feel a little less absolute, even as the next round waited just beyond the bright edge of morning. The night air still hung over the city, cold and metallic, while the arena street slowly emptied under wet neon light. Puddles on the pavement held broken reflections of red signs, passing cars, and tired faces that had stayed too long to see the final bell. Marcus Vale walked through that silence with his hands wrapped, his shoulders loose, and his mind far from the cheers that had once felt like victory. He was a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and a confident smile that now carried more weight than pride alone. He had won rounds before, and he knew how to stand tall in front of a crowd, but the night had changed him. It had shown him that every win could become a chain if the wrong people held the key. That was the real problem now, and Marcus understood it in a way he had never understood before. If Victor Shaw took control of his next fight, Marcus would not just lose money or pride, he would lose the right to choose his own future. Behind that threat stood Damian Cross, the heavy opponent waiting for the next order, and Sharon Pike, the reporter who could turn a careful lie into a public truth. Marcus could feel them all pulling at him, even as he moved into the dark, and that made the city feel smaller than before. Frank Monroe walked beside him in steady silence, and his presence gave the whole street a firmer shape. Frank was a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, a weathered face, and calm eyes that had seen too many fighters chase the wrong prize. He wore a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck, and he had the calm, strict tone of a man who cared more than he said. Frank wanted Marcus to stay sharp, stay honest, and stay free, because he knew the ring could make a man rich while still leaving him trapped. Lena Vale waited near the curb in her tailored coat and practical shoes, her long brown hair falling straight over one shoulder, her sharp eyes already measuring the danger ahead. She was Marcus's older sister and manager, and she cared about contracts, money, safety, and truth with equal force. Eddie Cole stood near her, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that still showed even in hard moments. He wore a casual jacket over a team shirt, and his energy never fully ran out because he believed Marcus could rise if the right people stayed beside him. These four mattered because they were the only wall Marcus could still trust, and tonight that wall was about to be tested. Victor Shaw arrived without hurry, as if the street itself belonged to him. He was a cold white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, a polished smile, an expensive dark suit, a silk tie, and a silver watch that caught the neon like a blade. In one hand, he held the thick boxing contract packet, a white folder stuffed with legal pages that looked clean from far away and dangerous up close. Victor wanted control, not only of the match, but of the story, the money, and the image of the fighter everyone had just started to love. He believed Marcus was valuable only if Victor could steer him, because a fighter with fame was more useful than a fighter with freedom. Sharon Pike stood a little behind him, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, a reporter's coat, and a notebook ready to catch every useful line. She wanted a headline that would bring attention, and she did not care if truth had to bend to fit it. Damian Cross waited near the arena entrance like a silent threat made human, a tall white man with black hair, broad shoulders, rigid posture, and a stare that looked built for pressure. He wore black boxing trunks and gloves even when he was not in the ring, as if he wanted everyone to remember he was always ready. Victor did not need to raise his voice because he believed the contract was enough. He told Marcus that the next bout would make him a star, but only if Marcus signed now and accepted Victor's terms. Frank immediately saw the trap, Lena saw the legal snare, and Eddie saw the insult. Marcus saw something else too. He saw that Victor was not offering a path forward, but a narrow hallway with locked doors on both sides. The first twist came when Sharon opened her notebook and showed what she had already written. Her notes described Marcus as ungrateful, reckless, and hard to manage, as if she had decided the story before she had ever spoken to him. Then Victor quietly admitted why he needed the pressure. The arena board had become nervous after Marcus's last performance because the crowd had started cheering for Marcus more than for the system around him. Victor feared that if Marcus kept speaking for himself, other fighters would start asking questions too. That would weaken Victor's whole control network, and it would make Damian Cross harder to use as a public warning. Marcus finally understood the full shape of the machine around him. Victor was not just managing fights. He was building a system where fighters stayed small, scared, and easy to replace. Sharon was feeding that machine with stories that made him look impossible to trust. Damian was the muscle waiting in the shadows in case fear alone did not work. Marcus felt anger rise, but he also felt the strange, cold movement of his phantom of doubt somewhere behind his thoughts. In the dark glass of a nearby window, he saw a shadowy figure with his own face shape, smoky edges, and glowing empty eyes. It did not speak, but its silent presence pressed on him like a heavy hand. It was the part of him that said he was still just a fighter, still trapped, still one bad choice away from losing everything. That phantom had appeared before in mirrors and corners, always when the pressure became too much, and Frank had begun to realize it was not a ghost from the street. It was Marcus's fear wearing his own face. Lena stepped forward then, calm but unshakable, and asked Victor for one simple thing, a fair reading of the contract. Victor smiled because he thought he was already winning, then he handed her the packet as if he were doing her a favor. Lena read the pages fast, her sharp eyes catching the hidden parts that would lock Marcus into long dates, weak payment shares, and fight choices Victor alone could change. Eddie paced beside her, muttering that the whole thing smelled wrong, while Frank stayed still and let the truth speak for itself. Marcus, standing in the wet glow of the street, felt the old part of himself want to sign anyway, because signing would bring money, attention, and a clear next step. That was the easy answer, and Victor knew it. But Marcus also remembered how the crowd had sounded when he fought for himself, and he remembered the cost hidden behind every deal that looked simple at first. So he made a choice that surprised everyone, even the Phantom watching from the window. He did not sign. He asked Victor why a man who believed in him needed a cage around every move. The question landed harder than any punch, and for one brief moment Victor's polished smile cracked. Damien shifted his weight, ready in case the talk turned into a clash, but Frank raised a hand and kept the distance honest. Sharon quickly wrote down the moment, already planning how to spin it later, yet even she could not hide the fact that Marcus had just refused a trap in public. Victor recovered fast because men like him hated being seen clearly. He reminded Marcus that refusal had consequences, that sponsors could vanish, that rankings could change, and that Damian Cross was waiting for a main event slot Marcus might never get again. The threat was clean and simple, and it was meant to scare him back into obedience. Instead, Marcus felt something new settle inside him, not certainty, but shape. He realized that winning a fight and winning his life were not the same thing, and that the second one would take more than power. It would take patience, truth, and people he could trust even when the cameras were gone. Lena told Victor that if the contract was fair, it would survive daylight, but if it needed darkness, it was already guilty. Frank supported her with a nod, and Eddie, though still nervous, stood close enough to show Marcus he was not alone. Victor left the packet in Lena's hands, but only after warning them that morning would bring choices they could not take back. Sharon followed him to catch his angle, while Damien stayed behind for one last look at Marcus, a look that said the next round would not be gentle. As the crowd finally drifted away and the street lights hummed overhead, Marcus looked again at the dark window. The phantom of doubt still stood there, but it no longer looked as large. Marcus saw himself inside it now, and he saw more than fear. He saw a fighter who could think, choose, and refuse. The night had not ended cleanly, and the danger was not gone, but something had changed in him that Victor could not easily touch. Morning was close, and with it came the next round, not only in the ring, but in the fight for his own name. The night still hung over Arena Street, and the wet pavement caught every line of neon light like broken glass. Cars moved slowly past the boxing arena, and the crowd that had filled the sidewalk earlier was thinning into small, restless groups. Above the doors, the signs buzzed and hummed, and every sound seemed to warn that trouble had not gone away. Marcus Vale stood near the curb with his hands wrapped and his shoulders set, a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and an athletic build, wearing his fitted robe over his ring gear. He looked calm on the outside, but inside he could still feel the pull of the dark window and the shape that had stood there. The phantom of doubt was not gone, and Victor Shaw still held the boxing contract packet that could control Marcus's next steps. Victor wanted Marcus tired, unsure, and easy to own because a confused fighter signs worse papers, listens to worse lies, and gives up more power. That was why this mattered so much now, because Marcus was close to a title path, and Victor wanted to turn that path into a cage. Frank Monroe stood beside him, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, and a weathered face, wearing a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck. Frank had trained fighters for many years, and he wanted Marcus to stay sharp, honest, and ready for the ring. Lena Vale, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and a composed expression, stepped between Marcus and the street with the quiet force of a protector. She wore a tailored coat and practical shoes, and she had one clear goal tonight, which was to keep her brother from being pushed into a bad deal. Eddie Cole, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that still showed even in worry, hovered close with his casual jacket and team shirt. He wanted to keep Marcus steady because loyal friends do not run when the pressure gets hard. The four of them watched Victor through the glass doors, where he stood clean and bright in his expensive dark suit, silk tie, and silver watch, with slick blonde hair and a polished smile that never reached his eyes. He looked less like a man than a locked door, and he liked it that way. Sharon Pike, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, stood a little behind him with her notebook ready. She wanted a story that would make her name bigger, and she twisted facts because attention mattered more to her than truth. Damian Cross waded deeper inside the arena, tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair, rigid eyes, and black trunks and gloves, looking like a wall that never moved. He wanted victory the hard way, by breaking every rhythm he faced. Victor lifted the white folder a little, as if it were a weapon, and Marcus knew the papers inside were meant to trap him. The contract promised money, ranking, and a fast path to fame, but Frank had already warned that the fine print gave Victor too much control over training, appearances, and future fights. If Marcus signed in a rush, Victor could delay bouts, cut support, and build his own story around Marcus's name. That was the real fight now, because a fighter can lose more than a match if he gives away his choices. Marcus had felt that danger all night, and the phantom of doubt had fed on every old fear, whispering that he was just a talented body someone else could steer. Victor did not step outside right away. He simply watched through the glass, and that cold patience made him seem even more dangerous. When he finally came out, he moved with slow confidence, holding the contract packet against his chest like a prize he expected to keep. Sharon followed close behind, ready to catch every word and turn it into a headline. Victor stopped under the nearest streetlight and gave Marcus a smile that was almost gentle. He told Marcus that morning was close, the crowd would want answers, and the smartest men signed early before doubt made them look weak. He said it in a smooth voice, but the meaning was clear. He wanted Marcus to think that choice had already been made for him. Marcus felt the old pressure rise again, and for one sharp moment, the dark window across the street seemed to answer. The phantom of doubt appeared there once more, with smoky edges, glowing empty eyes, and the same face shape as Marcus, like a shadow that had learned his name. This time, though, it did not seem larger than before. It looked closer, more honest, and more like a warning than a monster. Marcus saw what Frank had been trying to teach him for weeks. Fear was not a king unless he bowed to it. Lena noticed the change in his eyes and stepped forward first. She spoke to Victor in a steady voice, saying that no contract would be signed until the lawyers read every line and Marcus had full time to think. Victor's smile tightened. He replied that hesitation looked weak, that champions moved fast, and that people who needed too much help often missed their chance. Eddie laughed once, but there was no humor in it. He said Victor only liked speed when it helped Victor, and that pressure tricks did not make a man wise. Sharon wrote harder in her notebook, already choosing which pieces to twist later, because she wanted the story of a nervous fighter, not the story of a controlled one. Frank then stepped in with the calm voice that had saved Marcus more than once. He told Victor that the ring would settle the talk soon enough, and that if Victor believed Marcus was afraid, then Victor should stop hiding behind papers and let the fight speak. That landed. Damian, hearing the sharpness outside, appeared at the arena door for just a moment, and his presence changed the air. He looked directly at Marcus with a flat, controlled stare, as if he were already measuring the next clash. Damian was not loud, and that made him worse. He was the kind of opponent who believed strength was enough, and who respected nothing that could not be proved under the lights. Victor used Damian as proof of his power, and that made the whole setup feel tighter. Yet Marcus also felt something else. He noticed that Victor was not calm at all. Victor was working hard to keep control because he feared the one thing he could not fully buy, and that was a fighter who chose himself. That was the first clear twist of the night. Victor was not simply offering opportunity. He was frightened that Marcus might become too strong to own. The phantom of doubt shifted in the window, and Marcus understood that it had not been created by the darkness outside alone. It had been fed by every person who had ever tried to speak over him. That thought did not destroy the phantom, but it weakened it. Marcus straightened his robe, looked at Victor, and said he would never sign under pressure. He said he would read every page, fight every round honestly, and keep his name in his own hands. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Lena nodded once, Frank's face softened, and Eddie let out a breath he had been holding too long. Victor's polished smile stayed in place, but his eyes sharpened with anger. He told Marcus that courage was expensive and that the world punished people who moved too slowly. Then he turned, opened the folder, and let the first pages slide just enough for Marcus to see that the deal was packed with limits hidden inside praise. The offer was bait. It would have locked Marcus into a schedule that protected Victor's profit more than Marcus's career. Frank reached out and stopped Marcus from grabbing the papers in frustration, because anger can be used against a man who is not thinking. Instead, Frank asked for the folder. Victor refused at first, but Lena stepped in and named a lawyer by full name, along with a reporter waiting upstairs who would notice any strange delay. That was enough to make Victor hesitate. He hated public trouble almost as much as he hated losing control. For the first time that night, he looked forced to retreat a little. He gave the packet to Sharon instead, telling her to hold it and keep the story moving. Sharon accepted it too quickly because she still hoped to profit from the mess. But when she touched the papers, she saw the warnings written in clear print, and even she looked uncertain for a moment. Marcus saw that, and the phantom of doubt shivered in the glass again. It was not gone, but it was thinning. He realized something else too. The shadow had always worn his own face because it was made from every time he had doubted his right to stand tall. It was part fear, part shame, and part the false belief that other people knew him better than he knew himself. That truth hit harder than any punch because it meant he could not wait for the fear to vanish before he acted. He had to move while it was still there, so he did. Marcus stepped away from the curb, walked straight under the streetlight, and faced Victor and Damien together. He told them both that he was ready for the morning weigh-in, ready for the crowd, and ready for the ring, but only on his terms. His voice was calm, and that calm was stronger than rage. Damien said nothing, but his jaw tightened, and Victor's smile faded into a colder line. Frank put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, not as a shield, but as a sign of trust. Lena gathered the papers back under control, and Eddie gave Marcus a quick nod that said, without words, "You did not fold." Across the street, the dark window reflected them all. The phantom of doubt still stood there, but now it looked smaller, as if it had been forced to share space with the real Marcus at last. Morning light was beginning to pale the edge of the sky, and the arena doors opened wider as staff started moving inside. That meant the next round was waiting, not only in the ring, but in the public space where stories were made, twisted, and fought over. Victor turned his head slightly and said the day was young, as if he already had another plan. Marcus met his gaze and did not look away. He had not defeated every threat, and he did not pretend that he had. But he had crossed something inside himself, and that made him harder to bend. As the others moved toward the arena entrance, Marcus paused one last time to look at the dark window. The phantom of doubt was still there, but now it stood in the same place as his reflection, and he understood that this battle would continue. He was not finished with it, and it was not finished with him. Yet for the first time, he was no longer waiting to be rescued from himself. He walked forward with his team beside him, carrying the morning with him, and the story moved into the next fight, where Victor would have to try a new way to break a man who had finally started breaking free. The night air outside Arena Street was cold and wet, and the neon signs painted the pavement in red and blue. People moved in thick lines past the arena doors, while trucks, cameras, and security lights turned every puddle into a bright mirror. Inside that hard city glow, Marcus Vale walked forward with steady steps, and for the first time in a long while, he was not walking as a man who needed rescue. He was a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and an athletic build, and his face carried a calm smile that had not been there before. Beside him walked Frank Monroe, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, and a weathered face that showed years of hard training and harder lessons. Frank wore a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck, and he watched Marcus with the quiet care of a man who had taught him more than boxing. Lena Vale followed close, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and a composed expression, dressed in a tailored coat and practical shoes, and she kept her attention on every moving shadow because her job was to protect her brother and his future. Eddie Cole came on Marcus's other side, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that never seemed to leave his face for long, and his easy energy helped hold the team together when fear tried to slip in. The central problem was clear now, and it mattered more than any single match. Victor Shaw wanted to control Marcus through money, pressure, public shame, and fear, because a free fighter could not be easily owned. If Victor succeeded, Marcus would not only lose a fight, but also lose the chance to choose his own path. The phantom of doubt still followed Marcus, and it appeared in dark glass, in broken reflections, and in every quiet pause between breaths. It wore Marcus's face in a warped way, with smoky edges and glowing empty eyes, and it whispered the old lie that he was only one mistake away from falling apart again. But this night, Marcus did not stop at the reflection. He looked back at it, held its stare, and kept walking. The team entered the training building through the side door where the air smelled of sweat, tape, and old leather. Frank led Marcus straight to the ring because he believed the body had to be honest before the mind could be trusted. Damian Cross was already waiting there, a tall white man with black hair, broad shoulders, and a rigid stare that made the whole room feel smaller. Damian wore black boxing trunks and gloves, and his stillness made him seem even more dangerous because he never wasted movement and never showed warmth. Victor Shaw stood nearby in an expensive dark suit with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, a polished smile, a silk tie, and a silver watch that flashed every time he lifted the white folder in his hand. The boxing contract packet was thick and clean, and Victor held it like a trap that looked polite. Sharon Pike stood beside him, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, and she carried a notebook as if she were ready to turn every private weakness into a public story. Victor smiled at Marcus as if they were old friends, but his words were aimed like hooks. He said that the contract could still be changed, that the next fight could still be made easier, and that Marcus only had to admit he needed help. He did not say help in a kind way, he meant surrender. He wanted Marcus to sign away control, to let Victor own the terms, the schedule, the public image, and even the stories told about him. Sharon added her own pressure by saying the public was already asking whether Marcus was brave or unstable. Frank told her to write the truth, but Victor only laughed. He wanted Marcus to feel that every eye in the city was watching for one crack. Then he turned to Damian and nodded. Damian stepped into the ring and gave a hard, measured bow of the head, not out of respect, but out of certainty. He was there to break Marcus in the ring if words failed. He was not a cruel man in the simple way Victor was, but he believed power should be proven, and Victor had told him that Marcus was weak under pressure. That was Victor's new strategy. He had learned that Marcus was no longer falling apart at a single insult. So now Victor wanted to isolate him, shame him, and force him to prove himself in front of everyone. The Phantom of Doubt moved behind Marcus in the black glass wall, matching his shape one moment and then stretching taller the next, as if it fed on every small hesitation. Marcus felt the old fear rise, but he did not step back. He looked at Frank, Lena, and Eddie, and their faces reminded him that he was no longer alone in his own head. Training began before the crowd outside could grow louder. Frank made Marcus work through movement drills, then short bursts of footwork, then repeated jabs that had to stay clean even when Damian pressed forward like a wall. Marcus's body was strong and his punches were sharp, but Victor was not wrong about one thing. Pressure could still find the cracks in a fighter's mind if that fighter let his thoughts scatter. So Frank kept speaking in a calm, direct voice. He told Marcus to breathe low, to keep his eyes soft, to watch the shoulders before the hands, and to stay in the present moment. Lena watched from the edge of the ring, and she noticed what others missed. She saw how Marcus tensed whenever Victor smiled too long, and how the Phantom of Doubt appeared strongest when Marcus tried to prove too much at once. So she spoke to him in the blunt way only family can use. She told him he did not need to be perfect to be respected, and he did not need Victor's approval to be real. Eddie, trying to lighten the heavy air, called out little reminders between rounds, joking that Damian looked stiff enough to be a statue, and the team laughed just enough to loosen the room. But Victor was not finished. He had Sharon release a short article online that painted Marcus as unstable and easy to break, and she used cropped photos and sharp words to make him look like a problem instead of a contender. By the time Marcus saw the phone screen, the story had already spread. Fans outside the arena were shouting his name and then doubting it the next second. That was the point. Victor wanted Marcus to fight not only Damian, but the picture of himself that others were being told to believe. And then came the deeper twist, the one that changed the shape of the night. Frank had been watching Victor too closely, and he finally understood the pattern. Victor did not fear Marcus losing the fight. Victor feared Marcus becoming his own man, because if Marcus stood free, other fighters would see that the promoter's control was not complete. Victor had been building a system, not just a match. He wanted broken men, easy contracts, and headlines that kept everyone afraid. That was why the Phantom of Doubt had grown so strong. It fed on the same control Victor used in the real world. Marcus heard this, and for a moment the whole fight became bigger than boxing. It became a battle over who got to define a person's worth. When the call came for Marcus to step toward the ring for the public face-off, the room went quiet in that special way that only happens when everyone knows a turning point has arrived. Damian crossed his arms and waited. Victor held up the white folder again and promised with that polished smile that Marcus could still avoid embarrassment if he simply signed. Sharon raised her notebook, ready to capture whatever weak answer she hoped he would give. The phantom of doubt stood in the mirrored wall behind them, almost perfectly aligned with Marcus's reflection, and for one small second it seemed stronger than the man himself. Then Marcus did something new. He did not argue with the shadow, he did not beg it to leave, he did not try to outrun the fear. He looked at Victor first, then at Damien, then at the people who had stayed with him, and he spoke with a quiet voice that carried farther than a shout. He said he was tired of being shaped by other people's fear. He said he knew what Victor was doing now, and he would not sign away his life just to make Victor comfortable. He said the fight would happen on his terms, with his name intact. Victor's smile tightened for the first time because he could feel the room changing around him. Frank stepped beside Marcus, Lena lifted her chin, and Eddie gave one sharp nod, as if to say that was the line they had all been waiting for. Damien came forward and slammed one glove into the palm of the other, sending a hard sound through the room. The tension did not end. It only sharpened. Outside, the crowd roared louder as the arena doors opened wider and the neon light poured across the floor like a warning. Marcus felt the phantom of doubt still there, but now it was no longer the only thing in the mirror. Beside it stood a man with open eyes, a steady breath, and a team at his back. He had not won yet, and no one in that room believed the night would be easy, but the balance had changed. Victor had tried a new way to break him, and it had failed just enough to matter. Marcus turned toward the ring entrance, carried by the mourning he had found inside himself, while the next fight waited just ahead, still dark, still uncertain, and still very far from over. The arena lights stayed bright, but the night outside still pressed against the glass like a cold hand, and Arena Street at night glowed with wet pavement, neon signs, and restless crowds. Inside, the air smelled like sweat, smoke, and metal, while every cheer seemed to shake the walls a little more. Marcus Vale stood near the ring entrance with his fitted robe hanging open, his short black hair damp at the temples, his bright eyes forward, and his athletic body still tense from the fight before. He was a young black man with a confident smile that had not vanished, even when fear had tried to reach him through the mirror. Frank Monroe stood close by, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, a weathered face, and calm eyes that watched every small change in Marcus like a clock that never missed a beat. Lena Vale, Marcus's older black sister and manager, kept one hand on a white folder of contracts and the other near her coat pocket, her long brown hair pulled back, her sharp eyes fixed on the stage where Victor waited. Eddie Cole, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that had grown thinner tonight, stayed a step behind them with his team shirt under a casual jacket, ready to move whenever Marcus needed him. They all knew the problem now, and it was simple and ugly at the same time, because Victor Shaw was not only trying to win a boxing match, he was trying to make Marcus doubt himself so deeply that every future fight would belong to Victor before the bell even rang. That was why the night mattered, because if Marcus broke here, Victor would not just control one round, he would control the whole path ahead. Victor Shaw stood beneath the harsh ring lights like a man who had already decided how the story should end. He was a cold white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a polished smile that looked friendly until the eyes behind it turned hard. His expensive dark suit fit perfectly, his silk tie sat smooth against his chest, and a silver watch flashed each time he moved his hand. Beside him was the thick boxing contract packet, a white folder stuffed with legal papers that he held like a weapon, not because paper could hit hard, but because he knew words could trap people when money and fear were behind them. Victor wanted control not only of Marcus but of the whole arena, because he believed fighters were easier to sell when they were scared, cornered, and grateful for one small chance. Sharon Pike stood nearby with a reporter's coat, straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression that never softened, her notebook already open as she hunted for a story that would bring her attention, no matter who it hurt. She had been twisting every rumor into a sharper headline all week, and Victor liked her because her hunger for praise made her useful. Damian Cross waited in the shadows of the ring entrance, a tall white man with black hair, broad shoulders, and a rigid stare that seemed carved from stone. He wore black boxing trunks and gloves, and he carried himself like a wall that had learned how to punch. Damian did not speak much, but his motive was clear, because Victor had promised him a bigger place in the sport if he crushed Marcus tonight. Damian believed that power belonged to the man who could hold the center of the ring, and he meant to prove it with every step. Then there was the Phantom of Doubt, that dark figure that looked like Marcus in shape but not in spirit, with smoky edges and glowing empty eyes. It did not stand in the crowd like a normal person. It waited in mirrors, dark windows, and narrow reflections, and it kept trying to remind Marcus that fear could wear his own face. Frank leaned in first, his voice low and steady, because he knew Marcus did not need noise right now, he needed truth. He told Marcus that Victor had changed tactics because the first attack had failed. The mirror trick had not broken Marcus, so Victor had moved to pressure, paperwork, and public humiliation. The boxing contract packet held a clause that Victor wanted Marcus to sign after the next round, a clause that would lock Marcus into a long and unfair deal if he got desperate enough to reach for help. Lena had already seen through it, and that was why she had held the folder so tight. She told Marcus that Victor had arranged the contract as bait, because if Marcus lost his focus, he would be more likely to sign anything just to escape the night. Eddie stepped closer and said that the crowd was not as fully against Marcus as Victor hoped, because people had started to notice how often Victor used fear instead of fairness. This was the first clear twist of the night, and it hit hard because the real fight was not only in the ring. Victor had planned to use the next round as a trap, and Damien was only the visible part of it. Marcus listened, and for a moment the old doubt rose again, quiet and cold, because now he understood that the match had been built to corner him in every direction. The Phantom of Doubt flickered in the black edge of a nearby mirror, and its empty eyes seemed to say that no one could protect him from himself. But then Marcus looked at his team, and he saw something new in all of them, not hope by itself, but trust that had been earned through every hard hour of training. The bell for the next round rang through the building, and the sound struck Marcus like a command and a promise at the same time. He stepped through the ropes, and the ring felt smaller than before, as if the ropes had tightened around the whole world. Damien Cross stood in the center with his gloves raised, his face flat and unreadable, while Victor watched from the side with that polished smile, already sure the pressure would finish what the first trick had started. Sharon lifted her notebook, ready to twist the moment into a headline, and the crowd leaned forward as if they could smell danger. Marcus started with careful movement, light on his feet, his eyes reading Damien's shoulders, hips, and hands. Damien came forward with hard, direct force, pushing Marcus toward the ropes and forcing him to give ground. Each clash sent a sharp sound through the arena, and each step back reminded Marcus of the trap waiting outside the ring if he lost control. Victor shouted from below, not with anger but with calm poison, telling Marcus that he was already behind, already late, already half signed away. That voice had been designed to sink into fear, and for a second it nearly worked. The Phantom of Doubt appeared again in the reflection of a scoreboard panel, standing behind Marcus with the same face and the same eyes, but empty inside. Marcus felt it whisper that he was still the boy who hesitated, still the fighter who could be bent. Yet Frank's lessons came back to him in pieces, simple and firm: breathe first, see first, move with purpose, not panic. He slipped under Damien's next heavy swing, stepped wide, and answered with a clean body shot that forced Damien to reset. It was not enough to win, but it was enough to show that Marcus had not given the ring away. The fight grew sharper, and the crowd changed with it, because they could see that Marcus was no longer just surviving, he was making choices. Damien began to respect him, which made the danger greater, because a proud fighter like Damien would become even more relentless once challenged. Frank called out small corrections from the corner, Lena watched the contract folder like it might suddenly move by itself, and Eddie shouted for Marcus to keep the center when he could. Victor noticed the shift and tried to push harder, sending Sharon toward the front row to spread a false story that Marcus was close to quitting. Sharon wrote fast, but her eyes kept drifting back to Marcus, because even she could see that the fight was not following Victor's script anymore. Then came a brief opening, small and real, when Damien overcommitted on a strong rush, and Marcus turned it into a clean combination that drove Damien back a few steps. The arena erupted, not because the match was over, but because Marcus had finally made the other man look human. That moment mattered because it gave Marcus proof that Victor's control was not perfect. Still, the Phantom of Doubt did not vanish. It hovered in the polished black of the side mirror near the stairs, and this time it seemed less like a monster and more like a test. Marcus understood something new in that instant, and it changed the way he fought. The Phantom did not feed on weakness alone. It fed on lies, especially the lie that he had to stand alone. So Marcus glanced to his corner, saw Frank's steady hand, Lena's sharp focus, Eddie's loyal grin, and even the stubborn belief of the crowd beginning to rise, and he realized that trust was not a chain. It was a shield. As the round pressed on, Victor made one more move, and this one was crueler than the rest because it used the room itself. He ordered a light change near the mirrors along the side wall, knowing the reflections would pull at Marcus's attention and stir the phantom again. For a moment, the arena seemed full of Marcus's own face, each version staring back with a different level of fear. The shadow figure spread wider in the glass, and the empty eyes looked almost patient, as if waiting for Marcus to make the old mistake of staring too long. But Marcus did not look away in panic this time. He breathed, planted his feet, and met the reflection with a steady stare of his own. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He spoke to the phantom not as if it were a person, but as if it were a lie that had worn his shape for too long. He told it that fear could walk beside him, but it could not lead him anymore. The shadow shivered inside the mirror, and for the first time it seemed smaller than before. Damien charged again, driven by pride and Victor's promise, but Marcus caught the timing, slipped inside the strike, and answered with a hard, clean counter that sent Damien stumbling back into the ropes. The bell rang before either man could finish the round, and the crowd rose to its feet in a wave of noise. Victor's smile broke for just a second, Sharon stopped writing, and Lena finally let the contract folder drop to her side. Marcus stood in the center with his chest heaving, his short black hair damp, his bright eyes steady, and his confident smile returning not because the fight was over, but because he had changed inside it. He had entered the night trying to win one match, but now he understood he was also fighting for his right to belong to himself. Yet the battle was still not finished. Damien was still standing, Victor still held the contract packet, and somewhere in the dark glass behind the lights, the phantom of doubt was not gone, only waiting for the next chance to speak. The night outside the arena stayed cold and wet, and the neon signs threw broken colors across the pavement, while the crowd pressed close behind metal barriers and whispered like a storm that had not yet found its voice. Marcus Vale stood in the middle of that shining darkness, a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, an athletic build, and a confident smile that was no longer fake or borrowed. He wore colorful boxing trunks, wrapped hands, and a fitted robe hanging open at his sides, and now he looked less like a fighter chasing approval, and more like a man learning how to stand in his own name. Across from him, Damien Cross remained tall and rigid, a white man with black hair, broad shoulders, and a hard stare that did not soften for anyone, because he did not fight for fun or pride alone. He fought because Victor Shaw had promised him power, money, and a future built on other people's fear. Victor stood just behind the ring barrier in an expensive dark suit, silk tie neat, silver watch shining, and a polished smile that looked kind only from far away. In his hand was the thick white boxing contract packet, and everyone there knew he used those papers like chains. Lena Vale watched from the side with sharp eyes and a composed face, her long brown hair pulled back under the streetlight glow, because she had spent years protecting Marcus from deals that looked safe until they turned cruel. Frank Monroe, the middle-aged white trainer with gray hair, a sturdy build, weathered face, and calm eyes, kept his whistle at his neck and his voice steady, because he had seen too many young fighters lose themselves before the first bell. Eddie Cole, the Latino friend with curly black hair, a lean build, a warm grin that still showed even now, and an energetic stance, stayed near the edge of the crowd and refused to leave, because loyalty mattered more to him than fear. Sharon Pike, a white reporter with straight red hair, pale skin, a focused expression, and a notebook clenched in her hand, leaned near the flashing cameras because she wanted the best story possible even if she had to twist the truth to get it. Above all of them, in the dark glass of the arena and the black windows across the street, the phantom of doubt watched with smoky edges and glowing empty eyes, wearing the same face shape as Marcus and waiting for any crack in his spirit. Damien moved first, and the entire crowd answered with a sharp roar because his weight and power made every step feel like a warning. He did not smile, and he did not speak, but his body told the whole story, since he believed Marcus had no place in this fight and no right to walk away with Victor's contract still untouched. That was why Victor had chosen him in the first place, because a frightened champion was easier to control than a free one. Victor wanted Marcus signed, managed, and shaped into a marketable machine, because Marcus's rising fame could fill arenas, sell advertisements, and make Victor look like a master builder of stars. But Marcus had begun to see the truth, and that truth was simple and clear, because Victor never wanted a partner, only a product. As Damien stepped in, Marcus met him with tight footwork and calm breathing, and Frank's voice cut through the noise with short, direct words that kept Marcus centered. He did not shout instructions like a man trying to prove himself. He spoke like a man who trusted his student to think. Marcus slipped one heavy strike, answered with a clean counter, and felt the force travel through his wrapped hands and into his shoulders. The clash was hard, but it was not chaos, because Marcus was learning to read the battle instead of drowning inside it. He saw how Damien leaned too far on his right side. He saw how Victor's eyes kept drifting to the contract packet instead of the fight. He saw how Sharon raised her notebook instead of helping anyone. Most of all, he saw the phantom of doubt in the glass again, and this time the shadow was speaking in a voice only he could hear. It told him that he was only strong when others cheered. It told him that one bad fall would erase everything. It told him that if Victor won tonight, Marcus would spend the rest of his life moving to someone else's orders. For a brief moment, the old fear hit him hard, and the crowd seemed to grow far away, but then Lena stepped closer and called his name with a voice that was steady and full of love. She told him that his life was not a prize and that no paper could decide who he was. Frank gave one small nod, and Eddie lifted both fists near his chest, as if to say he was still there no matter what happened next. That was when the first real twist of the night came into focus, and even Victor's polished face changed for the first time. Sharon Pike, always hungry for a story, had been listening too closely to Victor for days, and she had started to notice that his contract packet held more than legal terms. It included a hidden clause that would keep Marcus tied to Victor's company for years, control his public image, block his own choices, and hand Victor a huge share of every future match Marcus fought. Victor had planned to sell the world a story of support while quietly taking away Marcus's freedom. Sharon had expected to gain a famous headline by revealing the deal, but she had not expected Lena to be 3 steps ahead of her. Lena had already copied the key pages, marked the hidden clause, and brought the facts to the arena because she knew Victor would try to trap Marcus the moment he felt pressure. Now she stepped out from the sideline and held up the copied pages, and the crowd around the street fell strangely quiet. Victor's smile finally broke, and his calm mask slipped just enough for everyone to see the anger underneath. He tried to laugh and call the pages fake, but Sharon, seeing her chance, confirmed that the handwriting and seals matched the original packet in his hand. That moment changed the whole fight because it meant this was never just about a boxing match. It was about a man trying to buy another man's future and about a family refusing to let that happen. Damien, hearing Victor exposed, hesitated for the first time because he had been told this would be a clean path to success, not a public trap. His fists lowered a little, and Marcus saw the truth in his eyes because Damien was not a monster made of nothing. He was a man who had chosen the wrong side because he was afraid of becoming weak, poor, and forgotten. Marcus used that tiny opening to speak, not to taunt, but to tell Damien that a strong man did not need stolen control to matter. The words landed harder than any punch, and for a second Damien looked more tired than angry. Then the phantom of doubt rose higher in the dark glass, and the night seemed to bend around it because the shadow could not stand truth for long. It pressed its empty eyes toward Marcus and tried one last time to cut him apart from the inside. It showed him the old fear of losing, the old fear of being laughed at, the old fear of becoming nothing when no one was watching. But Marcus did not answer with rage, he answered with certainty. He said quietly at first and then with more strength that he had spent too long asking permission to be himself. He said that a contract, a crowd, a promoter, or a shadow could not own his heart. He said that he would fight for victory, but he would no longer fight to become someone else's idea. The shadow flickered because it had fed on Marcus's doubt and now found less to hold on to. Frank smiled in a small, proud way, and Lena closed her hand around the copied pages like a promise kept. Eddie shouted Marcus's name, and the crowd answered because people could feel a change before they could explain it. Damien rushed in one final time, desperate to restore control for Victor, and the two men collided in a hard, fast exchange that shook the wet street and made the arena lights tremble. Marcus blocked, turned, and drove Damien backward step by step, not with blind anger but with careful force and clear purpose. Victor shouted for Damien to finish it, but his voice sounded smaller now because the people around him had begun to see him clearly. Sharon wrote fast in her notebook, no longer chasing a fake version of the truth but the real one unfolding in front of her. Damien finally stopped and looked at Marcus, and in that brief silence, he understood that Marcus was not the easy target he had expected. He was a fighter with a family behind him, a trainer beside him, a friend in the crowd, and a will that no contract could fold. At last, Damien took one hard breath and stepped back, forced to retreat for the first time that night. He did not fall, and no one celebrated his pain because this was not that kind of story. Instead, the moment carried a different kind of weight since it showed that control had cracked and could crack again. Victor tightened his grip on the white folder, but he could not hide the fact that everyone had seen the truth in it now. Lena moved closer to Marcus, and for the first time that night, she did not look like a sister trying to hold the world together alone. She looked like a partner in the fight, and that mattered because Marcus had finally stopped acting like he had to carry everything by himself. Frank told him to breathe and keep his feet under him, and Marcus did exactly that because he was no longer chasing panic. He was choosing his own rhythm. Eddie grinned wide, even while sweat darkened his face because he could see that the man in front of him had changed for good. The phantom of doubt still hovered in the glass, but it looked weaker now, as if it had been starved by truth and refused by courage. Victor, however, was not finished, and that made the night dangerous again. He raised the contract packet and spoke in a low, cold voice, promising that if Marcus did not sign soon, every door in the city would close, every sponsor would turn away, and every chance he had built would be poisoned by rumor. It was a cruel threat, and it was meant to bring the fear back. Marcus felt the old shadow twitch inside him, but this time he did not hide from it. He looked Victor in the eye and said that he would rather walk through hard days free than live one easy day in a cage. The words did not end the fight, but they changed its shape, because now the battle was no longer about whether Marcus could win a match. It was about whether he could carry his own life without flinching, and that struggle was only beginning. As the arena lights burned over the wet street and the crowd held its breath, Marcus raised his hands again, not as a boy begging to be chosen, but as a man ready to choose himself, while Victor, Damien, Sharon, Frank, Lena, Eddie, and the Phantom of Doubt all waited to see what he would do next. The night air over Arena Street felt cold and heavy, and the wet pavement shone under the neon lights like broken glass. People still crowded both sides of the street, even after the match had been delayed, because no one wanted to miss the moment when Marcus Vale either stood tall or folded under pressure. Marcus was a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and an athletic build, and he wore colorful boxing trunks, hand wraps, and a fitted robe that moved with each breath. He had a confident smile, but right now that smile was gone because this fight had stopped being about trophies and pride. It had become a test of whether he could keep his own life in his hands. Beside him stood Frank Monroe, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, a weathered face, and calm eyes, wearing a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck. Frank wanted Marcus to survive the night with his mind intact, not just his body, because Frank knew a champion who could not think for himself was already trapped. Near them was Lena Vale, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and a composed expression, wearing a tailored coat and practical shoes. She was Marcus's sister and manager, and she wanted the same thing Frank wanted, but with a sharper edge because she knew Victor Shaw had been circling Marcus like a predator in a suit. Eddie Cole, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, a warm grin, and energetic posture, stood close too, wearing a casual jacket and team shirt. Eddie wanted to keep Marcus laughing and moving forward because he had seen too many good people get swallowed by fear. And then there was Victor Shaw, a cold white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a polished smile, dressed in an expensive dark suit, a silk tie, and a silver watch. In his hand, he held the thick boxing contract packet inside a white folder, and he wanted Marcus to sign it right there because the contract would make Marcus rich, famous, and obedient all at once. Victor had built his whole plan on control, and he believed that if Marcus signed, then the fighter would belong to him in every way that mattered. Damien Cross stood a few steps away, tall and broad, with black hair, a rigid stare, black boxing trunks, and gloves that looked ready for work. Damien was not smiling because he did not care about the crowd and he did not care about Victor's speech. He wanted one clean chance to prove that Marcus was still too soft for the real world, and he wanted that proof in front of everyone. Sharon Pike, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, moved through the crowd with her notebook open. She wore a reporter's coat and she wanted the most shocking story possible because attention was her reward and trouble was her currency. She had already twisted the first part of the night, and now she was waiting for Marcus to make one more mistake so she could sharpen the lie. Above all of them, in the dark edges of windows and the shine of the wet street, Marcus could feel the phantom of doubt. It looked like his own face made from smoke, with glowing empty eyes and a looming human shape, and it came whenever he feared that he was not enough. It did not speak like a man, but it still whispered the worst thing he could hear, that every choice he made would ruin him. Marcus felt that shadow because it lived in the same place as shame, and tonight that shame had grown huge. Victor stepped forward first, holding out the white folder so the crowd could see it. His voice was smooth, almost kind, but every word carried a hook. He told Marcus that the arena wanted a hero, the cameras wanted a winner, and the city wanted a story it could believe in. Then he said the contract would give Marcus a real future, real money, and real respect, but only if Marcus stopped fighting the crowd and started trusting the people who knew how to guide him. That was Victor's trick. He never said he wanted to own Marcus. He said he wanted to help him while quietly making sure every choice went through him. Lena stepped forward before Marcus could answer, and her sharp eyes never left Victor's watch. She said the contract had too many hidden pages, too many trap lines, and too many words that gave Victor power over Marcus's training, schedule, image, and future matches. She had studied every line, and she knew Victor had included a clause that would let him punish Marcus for refusing any order that damaged his brand. Victor smiled wider because he had expected her to notice only part of it. Then Sharon lifted her notebook and told the crowd that Marcus was hesitating because he was scared of responsibility. That was her lie, and it landed fast because people love simple stories more than true ones. The crowd began to murmur, and Marcus felt the phantom of doubt grow stronger in the reflections around him. It showed him a boy who had been told to be grateful for every chance, a boy who had learned to bow his head when adults spoke, a boy who was still asking for permission to become the man he wanted to be. Frank saw the change in Marcus's face, and he stepped closer, speaking low and clear. He told Marcus that fear was not the same as weakness, and that a man could shake without surrendering. Frank said the real fight was never about pleasing Victor, and it was never about impressing the crowd. It was about whether Marcus would let other people decide what he deserved. That simple truth hit harder than any punch because Marcus had spent so long trying to be the answer to everyone else's problems. He had wanted to make Lena proud, keep Frank steady, satisfy Eddie, silence Sharon, and outshine Damien, all at the same time. But every one of those wants had pulled him in a different direction, and that was exactly what Victor had counted on. Victor had seen a talented fighter with a good heart, and he had tried to turn that heart into a leash. Damien then took one step forward and said he was done waiting. He told Marcus that if Marcus was truly strong, then he would prove it right now without hiding behind speeches or excuses. Damien's voice was hard, but the motive behind it was plain. He wanted to crush Marcus's hesitation before it grew into something he could not break later, because Damien believed the world only respected the person who struck first and never looked back. Eddie moved to stand beside Marcus, and for once his grin faded into a serious look. He told Marcus that being brave did not mean being alone, and that Marcus did not have to carry every voice in the street by himself. The phantom of doubt swelled between them like a dark wall, and for a moment Marcus saw his own face in the reflection of a puddle, split by rain and neon, looking smaller than he felt. Then something changed. Marcus reached out and took the white folder from Victor's hand, but he did not sign it. Instead, he opened it and read the top page aloud in a clear voice so the crowd could hear every word. He spoke slowly at first, then with more force, as he pointed out the clauses that gave Victor control over his image, his next fights, and even his right to walk away from the arena if Victor approved the choice. The crowd went quiet because now the story had changed again. Marcus was not begging anymore. He was exposing the trap in public. Victor's polished smile finally cracked, and for the first time his voice lost its smooth shape. He tried to laugh and say Marcus misunderstood the business, but Lena immediately backed Marcus up, naming the hidden clauses one by one. Frank nodded in silence because this was exactly what he had hoped Marcus would learn. Sharon's eyes narrowed and she realized her clean headline had just been ruined. She had wanted a lazy story about a nervous fighter, but now she was standing in front of proof that Victor had been using pressure and fear to tighten his grip. Damien looked less angry than confused because he had expected a breakdown, not a stand. Then the phantom of doubt appeared strongest of all, tall and smoky behind Marcus, like it was about to swallow him. Marcus felt it telling him that he had gone too far, that Victor would ruin him now, that everyone would turn on him. But instead of shrinking, Marcus straightened his back. He looked at Victor, then at Damien, then at the crowd, and he said that he would not sign anything he had not chosen for himself. Those words were simple, but they changed the whole street. Victor's face hardened and he tried one last move. He told Marcus that without him, there would be no spotlight, no ranking, and no path to the title. Then he added that Damien was ready to crush him in the ring, and the only smart choice was to take the deal before it was too late. That threat was meant to sound practical, but it only showed how little Victor understood Marcus now. Marcus did not answer Victor right away. Instead, he turned to Damien and said he was still ready to fight, but not as a puppet and not as Victor's project. He would enter the ring because he chose to, not because someone cornered him into it. Damien stared back and something cold passed between them because Damien had never heard an opponent speak that way. It was not bravado. It was not a pose, it was a clean line drawn in the wet street. Even Sharon had to lower her notebook for a second because the truth in Marcus's voice was stronger than her spin. Eddie let out one sharp breath and laughed with relief, while Lena closed the contract packet and held it tight as if she were locking away a trap. Frank finally blew his whistle once, a small sound, but it carried like a signal. He told Marcus that this was the first time he had really stood in his own corner. Marcus nodded, and for the first time that night, the confident smile returned to his face, not because everything was easy, but because he had stopped asking to be saved. Still, the night was not finished, because Victor was not a man who gave up when a plan failed. He stepped back into the glow of the arena sign, and he made a phone call with one hand while keeping his eyes on Marcus. Whatever he said was low and quick, and the crowd could only catch a few words. Then a side door near the arena rolled open, and the sound from inside changed, as if more people were gathering for the next phase of the event. Damien noticed it first, and his hard stare shifted toward the opening. Frank's calm eyes narrowed. Lena tightened her grip on the folder. Eddie moved a half step closer to Marcus. And Sharon, despite herself, looked as hungry as ever because a bigger story was coming. Marcus felt the phantom of doubt one last time in the corner of his vision, but it no longer looked as large as before. It was still there, and it was still dangerous, yet it had lost some of its power the moment Marcus named the truth out loud. The street lights flickered across the rain, and the crowd leaned in again, because everyone could feel that the next move would matter even more than the last. Victor's polished smile returned, but now it looked forced, like a mask held up by anger. He said they were not done yet, and the way he said it promised trouble. Marcus lifted his hands again, not to beg, not to show off, but to prepare himself for whatever came next. And as the arena door opened wider, revealing deeper shadows inside, the night held its breath and waited for the next fight to begin. The arena sat under cold neon light, and the wet street outside shone like dark glass. People pressed close around the entrance, but no one spoke loudly now because everyone could feel how badly this night could turn. Inside, the air smelled like sweat, old smoke, and polished wood, while the crowd noise rolled through the hall like a heavy storm. Victor Shaw stood near the open door in his expensive dark suit, with his slick blonde hair neat and his silver watch catching the light. He looked calm from far away, but up close his sharp smile was tight and thin. In one hand he held the thick white boxing contract packet, and in the other he kept his arm folded behind his back as if he already owned the whole room. Marcus Vale stood a few steps away, young and strong, with short black hair, bright eyes, and an athletic body held ready for impact. His colorful trunks and hand wraps looked bright under the harsh lights, but his face was serious now, because he could feel this was not just another match. Frank Monroe, his trainer, stayed at his side with gray hair, a weathered face, and calm eyes that missed nothing. Lena Vale, his older sister, watched from the edge of the light with her long brown hair, sharp eyes, tailored coat, and the kind of steady posture that told the world she did not scare easy. Eddie Cole hovered near the walkway with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that was trying hard to stay warm. Sharon Pike stood a little farther back, straight red hair neat around her pale face, notebook ready, her hard expression hungry for a story that would draw attention. The problem was clear to everyone in that hallway now. Victor was not simply promoting a fight. He was trying to force Marcus into a contract that would give Victor control over his career, his public image, and the next fights after tonight. If Marcus gave in, he would win cash now but lose his freedom later. If he refused, Victor could bury him in bad press, trap him with delays, or throw him into harder fights until he broke. That was why the stakes mattered so much. Marcus had already worked too hard and his family had already sacrificed too much to let a man in a perfect suit turn his future into a tool for profit. Victor lifted the white folder and tapped it against his own palm. "You walked in once," he said with a polished voice that now sounded forced. "You can walk out with a deal or you can walk out with nothing." Marcus did not answer right away because he saw something else in the dark glass beside the door. In the reflection, his phantom of doubt appeared again, a smoky shape with his own face, empty glowing eyes, and a body made of shadow. It leaned close in the glass as if it knew his weakest thought. "You are too late," it seemed to say without words. "You are too small for this room. You will bend like everyone else." Marcus swallowed, and for one moment the fear landed in his chest like a stone. Frank noticed it at once. The trainer stepped closer, placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder, and spoke in a low voice that only his fighter could hear. "He wants your fear more than your signature," Frank said. "Do not give him either one." Lena came in from the side, her expression sharp and controlled. She held a folded note she had just taken from Eddie, and she looked straight at Victor without blinking. "We saw what you sent to the press office," she said. "You already tried to paint Marcus like he was reckless, and you already tried to make this fight look fixed." Sharon's pen paused when she heard that because she had wanted a clean headline, but now she could see the story was darker and uglier than she first thought. Victor smiled again, but this time it looked like a crack in painted glass. "Careful," he said. "A rumor can ruin a man faster than a punch can." Eddie moved up beside Lena, his grin gone now. He had the easy face of a loyal friend, but his eyes were hard with worry. "Then maybe you should stop hiding behind rumors," he said. "If you believe in Damien Cross, let Damien fight clean and let Marcus fight free." That name drew a shift in the crowd. Damien Cross had been waiting deeper inside the arena, and everyone knew why he mattered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and built like a wall in black trunks and gloves, with rigid black hair and a stare that could make weaker men step back. Damien was not a man who loved the spotlight. He loved order, control, and victory that left no room for doubt. Victor had found him, trained him, and fed him a simple promise. If Damien won tonight, Victor would make him the face of the whole promotion and give him the power to crush every rising fighter in the city. Damien accepted because he believed strength should rule, and because he feared being forgotten if he did not stand above everyone else. That made him dangerous, but it also made him easy for Victor to steer. Victor turned his head toward the deeper shadows in the arena, and a new door opened wide with a harsh creak. The sound carried down the hallway like a warning bell. From inside came the low pulse of the ring announcer and the restless roar of people who had no idea how much was hidden behind the curtain. Marcus felt the pressure tighten around him, yet he also felt something else now. He felt the difference between being pushed and being led. Victor wanted to push him into panic. Frank wanted to lead him through the fear. Lena wanted to protect the family name. Eddie wanted to keep the team standing. Sharon wanted a story, but even she was starting to see where the real power sat. And Marcus, standing at the center of all of it, understood that this was the moment when he had to choose whether he would be managed like an object or move like a man. The phantom of doubt flickered again in the glass, and this time it wore his own confident smile, twisted into a sneer. Marcus felt the old voice in his mind, the one that told him every mistake would be fatal for his future, every stumble would embarrass his sister, and every missed shot would prove Victor right. He almost backed away, but then he heard Frank's whistle hang softly against the trainer's chest, and he remembered the long nights of practice, the hard lessons, and the way Frank never gave praise too early. He remembered Lena sitting through every meeting, making sure nobody signed away what they had earned. He remembered Eddie running messages, clearing paths, and standing guard when the crowd got ugly. Most of all, he remembered why he had started. He had not entered boxing to become a puppet. He had entered because he loved the fight, loved the chance to prove that a young black man from a hard neighborhood could build his own name without bending to a crooked man in a polished suit. That thought did not erase his fear, but it gave his fear a shape he could face. Victor noticed the change and narrowed his eyes. "Do not mistake noise for power," he said. "This arena belongs to whoever controls the contract." Lena answered before Marcus could, her voice steady and low. "No," she said. "It belongs to whoever earns the right to stand in it." Sharon finally wrote that line down because it was the first thing anyone had said all night that sounded true. Then the arena door opened wider and the deeper hall beyond it spilled out a colder wind. Damien Cross stepped into view at last, and the room seemed to tighten around his frame. He wore black gloves, black trunks, and a plain face that showed no waste of feeling. His dark eyes locked on Marcus with the calm of a man who believed every problem could be solved by force. Damien said nothing at first. He only looked from Marcus to Victor and then to the contract packet in Victor's hand. That small glance said more than words. Damien was not blind. He had begun to notice that Victor's control reached farther than his own corner had told him. He had been promised fame but not respect. He had been promised victory but not truth. Victor saw the shift too, and for the first time his forced smile disappeared completely. He stepped closer to Damien, trying to recover the room, and said, "Do not listen to them. Win tonight and all the rest will make sense." But Damien did not move. Marcus saw the hesitation, and that hesitation was the twist that changed everything. The supposed monster in the ring was not fully loyal to the man behind him. He was still dangerous, still strong, still ready to fight, but he was no longer simple. Victor had built his power on people believing they had no choice, and now one of his strongest fighters was starting to question the shape of that power. Marcus felt the phantom of doubt split apart in the glass, its shadow edges thinning under the bright arena light. It still lingered, but it was weaker now, because doubt could not live forever when the truth was finally spoken out loud. Frank gave Marcus a small nod, not because the danger was gone, but because the path had changed. "Listen," Frank said, "whatever happens in the ring, you keep your head clear. You do not fight Victor's fear, you fight your own fight." Lena touched Marcus's arm once, quick and sure. "And we stay with you," she said. Eddie gave a sharp grin again, smaller than before, but real. "Always," he said. Sharon closed her notebook for a moment and looked up, her expression no longer cold. "I came for a headline," she admitted, "but this is bigger than that." Victor heard all of it, and the polished calm on his face finally gave way to raw anger. He tightened his grip on the contract packet until the white folder bent in his hand. Yet he still tried one last move, because men like Victor never stopped when they were losing control. He pointed toward the ring and spoke in a voice made for crowds. "Then let the next round decide who belongs here." The crowd beyond the curtain erupted at those words, hungry for action, blind to the trap beneath them. Marcus took one breath, then another, and lifted his hands into a ready stance. He was still afraid, but now his fear no longer owned him. Damien rolled his shoulders once, eyes fixed ahead, and stepped toward the bright center of the arena. Victor followed with measured steps, still carrying the contract packet like a weapon, while the phantom of doubt stayed just behind Marcus, half gone, half waiting. The next bell had not sounded yet, but everyone could feel it coming. And when it did, this night would force someone to break, someone to reveal the truth, and someone to stand in the light without turning away. The arena street glowed under rain and neon, while the crowd held its breath in a tense hush. Wet pavement reflected red signs, white lights, and the dark shapes of people packed shoulder to shoulder. Marcus Vale stood near the bright center doors, a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, an athletic build, and a smile that had once looked easy but now looked earned. He wore colorful boxing trunks, hand wraps, and a fitted robe, and every part of him said he was ready to fight for more than victory. Beside the ring path, Frank Monroe watched with calm eyes, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, and a weathered face that had seen too many bad deals. He wore a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck, and he cared about Marcus like a son. Lena Vale stood close too, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and a composed expression, wearing a tailored coat and practical shoes. She had spent the whole night protecting her brother from men who wanted to own him. Eddie Cole, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, and a warm grin that never fully left his face, leaned forward with nervous energy, ready to help at any moment. Then Victor Shaw moved in behind the light, a cold white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a polished smile, wearing an expensive dark suit, a silk tie, and a silver watch. He still carried the thick boxing contract packet in a white folder, and he held it like a tool of control. Damien Cross, tall and broad with black hair and a rigid stare, rolled his shoulders and stepped into the center glow, while Sharon Pike, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, waited nearby with her notebook open, ready to twist whatever she saw into a story that sold. And just behind Marcus, half seen in the darker edge of a mirror and half lost in smoke, the phantom of doubt lingered with Marcus's face shape and empty glowing eyes, waiting to feed on the next crack in his courage. Victor stopped just far enough away to look calm, even though his eyes were sharp and hungry. He lifted the white folder slightly and said that Marcus still had a chance to make this easy, because the contract could make him famous, rich, and protected. But his voice gave him away because what he really wanted was not to help Marcus at all. He wanted to turn Marcus's name, his fights, and his future into property that could be sold, changed, and controlled. Frank saw it clearly, and he told Marcus in a steady voice that a contract written in fear was never a gift. Lena stepped forward and explained the part Victor did not want the crowd to hear, saying that the papers were full of hidden terms, private control, and long commitments that would let Victor decide where Marcus fought when he fought, and how much of his own life he kept. Eddie cursed under his breath and said that Victor had brought a trap dressed as opportunity. Sharon wrote quickly, already searching for a headline because she cared more about attention than truth. Damien, meanwhile, remained silent and still because he had a different purpose. He did not care about papers. He cared about proving that pressure would crush Marcus before the public ever saw him rise. He had been promised a bigger place if he broke Marcus tonight, and that promise had made him cruel in a quiet way. Around them, the phantom of doubt leaned closer in the dark reflections, as if it could smell Marcus's fear and wanted him to believe every lie Victor had ever spoken. The next bell did not ring, but the silence became its own kind of blow. Victor opened the folder and showed the top page, then asked Marcus if he was ready to stop pretending he could stand alone. That question cut deeper than any punch could have because it was built to make Marcus feel small in front of everyone watching. Marcus looked at the paper, then at Damien, then at the faces around him, and for one long moment the old fear tried to return. He remembered every locked door, every lie, every time someone told him he was lucky just to be invited into a room that was meant to cage him. The phantom of doubt swelled behind him, smoky and tall, filling the edge of a mirror with his own face and a hollow stare. It whispered without words that Marcus was only strong when others protected him, and that if they stepped back, he would fold. But then Frank spoke again, simple and firm, and reminded Marcus that strength was never about pretending not to be afraid. It was about choosing what to do while afraid. Lena touched Marcus's arm and said he did not owe Victor a single piece of his freedom. Eddie nodded hard and said the whole street was watching now. And that was true because even the crowd had started to understand that this was not only a boxing night, it was a fight over who got to define Marcus Vale. Marcus took one slow breath and the room seemed to narrow around it. Then he did something Victor had not planned for. He reached out, took the white folder from Victor's hand and opened it for everyone to see. He did not tear the pages and he did not throw them away because he did not need a dramatic show. He only needed truth. With Lena's help, he pointed to the hidden lines that gave Victor full control over his training, his matches, and even the stories written about him. He turned the pages so the front row could see the words clearly, and he said that a man who needed fine print to win was already afraid of losing. The crowd reacted at once, with gasps, shouts, and angry voices rising from the wet street. Sharon Pike looked startled for the first time because her story was slipping away from her hands. Victor's polished smile stiffened, then cracked because the paper meant to trap Marcus had become a mirror for Victor's greed. Damien finally stepped forward, not because he cared about the contract, but because he hated weakness in any form. He demanded that Marcus stop hiding behind words and prove himself in the ring. That was the twist Victor had counted on all night. He thought the contract was the real weapon, but the real weapon was Marcus refusing to be silent. The moment the crowd understood the trick, Victor lost part of his hold, and the phantom of doubt behind Marcus shuddered, as if truth had struck it harder than any punch. Then Damien moved first and the air changed at once. He came in with heavy steps and a sharp glare, trying to turn the street into a cage built from body pressure and fear. Marcus slipped back, kept his guard high, and let Damien's force pass by instead of meeting it head-on. Frank called out one clean instruction after another, his voice calm through the storm. Lena moved Victor away from the papers so they would not vanish or be rewritten. Eddie guided the nearest onlookers back, making space while still shouting for Marcus to keep his balance. Sharon, unable to resist, wrote down every reaction she saw, but her notebook could no longer shape the truth into something easy and false. Damien threw a hard combination, fast and relentless, and Marcus took the first impact on his gloves, then the second on his shoulders, and then he turned the rhythm aside. He was not winning with power, he was winning with patience. The phantom of doubt swelled again at the edge of every wet reflection, telling Marcus that one mistake would expose him. But Marcus had learned something from the night already. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt like a command. It felt like weather. He planted his feet, moved with care, and answered Damien with a clean counter that drove him back a step. The crowd roared not because the fight was over, but because the first crack had appeared in the wall Victor built. Victor, seeing the crowd turn, made one last desperate move. He told Damien to keep pressing, and he told Sharon to write that Marcus was unstable, reckless, and not fit for the spotlight. But now the lies sounded thin. Lena raised her voice and told the crowd that Victor had spent months buying pressure, planting stories, and using contracts to trap fighters who needed a chance. Frank backed her up without hesitation, and Eddie called out the names of other men who had walked away from Victor for the same reason. The story around the arena shifted fast because truth spreads quickly when people are finally ready to hear it. Damien hesitated for the first time, not because he had become kind, but because he realized Victor had never cared about him either. He had only been useful while he was dangerous. Marcus saw that change, and he spoke to Damien without anger, telling him that they were both standing in a fight Victor had built for his own profit. That simple truth landed harder than any hard strike. Damien's jaw tightened, his stance loosened by a fraction, and the pressure around him began to break. The phantom of doubt flickered, then thinned, because it could not live where people were finally naming what hurt them. Victor clenched the contract packet, but the white folder now looked smaller in his hand, not bigger. He had not lost everything yet, but he had lost the clean control he wanted. And as the bell finally rang across the arena street, loud and clear, Marcus stood under the light with his guard up, his breathing steady, and his heart changed. He was no longer fighting only to prove he could win. He was fighting to stay free, to protect the people beside him, and to face whatever came next without turning away. The night was not finished, and the next round waited just beyond the sound of the bell. The arena street shone like black glass under the neon signs, and the rain had already turned the pavement into a mirror of red, blue, and white light. The crowd still pressed along the ropes and barriers, talking fast, waving phones, and watching every move as if the whole block had become part of the ring. Above them, the old arena towered like a hard stone ship in the dark, and the air carried the smell of wet concrete, hot metal, and cheap food from the carts near the corner. Marcus Vale stood at the center of it all, a young black man with short black hair, bright eyes, and an athletic build, his colorful boxing trunks darkened by mist and shadow, his hand wraps tight, and his breathing calm. He had been here before, but he was not the same man who had walked in earlier. He wanted more than victory now. He wanted freedom, and he wanted to keep the people beside him from getting crushed by the people who used the fight like a tool. Frank Monroe stood close by, a middle-aged white man with gray hair, a sturdy build, and a weathered face that had seen too many bad nights to trust easy smiles. He wore a simple training shirt, dark pants, and a whistle around his neck, and he watched Marcus with the same steady care he always showed in the gym. Frank did not just want Marcus to win. He wanted Marcus to stay himself because he had seen too many fighters get swallowed by pressure, money, and pride. Lena Vale was beside the ring barrier, an older black woman with long brown hair, sharp eyes, and a composed face that stayed strong even when the world tried to lean on her. She wore a tailored coat and practical shoes, and she had one clear job tonight. She wanted to keep her brother safe from Victor Shaw and from the lies that came with him. Eddie Cole, a Latino man with curly black hair, a lean build, a warm grin, and an energetic posture, stayed near her shoulder, ready to move whenever she did. He was loyal, fast, and always the first to step in when the night turned ugly. Together, they knew the real danger was not only Damien Cross in the ring. It was the man using the ring to own people. Victor Shaw stood just beyond the light, polished and cold, like a knife wrapped in a silk tie. He was a white man with slick blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a smile that looked friendly until anyone noticed how empty his eyes were. His expensive dark suit stayed dry under the awning, and a silver watch flashed when he lifted the thick boxing contract packet in a white folder. He wanted Marcus signed, boxed in, and controlled. He wanted to turn talent into property because that is how he made money, and because he believed every fighter could be bent if enough pressure was used at the right time. Sharon Pike hovered nearby, a hard-eyed white woman with straight red hair, pale skin, and a focused expression, holding her notebook like a weapon. She wanted a headline that would spread fast, and she did not care how much truth had to be twisted to get it. She had already painted Marcus as reckless, and she was ready to make the next scene look even worse. Damien Cross waited on the far side of the street entrance, a tall white man with black hair, broad shoulders, and a rigid stare, dressed in black boxing trunks and gloves. He was not loud like Victor, and he was not clever like Sharon. He was a wall of pressure, and he wanted to break Marcus down because Victor had promised him status, money, and the chance to become the face of the arena. That was the simple shape of the danger. If Marcus lost control, Victor would trap him with papers and public shame. If Marcus won too openly, Victor would still try to claim the victory as his own. The bell had already changed something in Marcus, and that change was showing now in the way he moved. He did not rush. He did not glare at the crowd. He kept his shoulders loose and his eyes clear, while Frank gave him one small nod that meant more than any speech. Damien stepped forward first, gloves up, chin low, and every inch of him tense with the promise of impact. Marcus answered by settling into his stance and meeting him at the edge of the wet light. The first clash came hard and fast, not with blood or ruin, but with force against force, gloves thudding, shoes sliding, shoulders turning, and water splashing from the pavement. Damien drove forward like he had no room for doubt, and Marcus gave ground only enough to stay alive in the moment. The crowd roared as both men traded sharp strikes, each one looking for a gap, each one trying to make the other blink. But Marcus no longer fought only for clean victory. He fought to keep his center, and that made his movement different. He saw the opening before it fully appeared, slipped aside, and answered with a clean combination that forced Damien back a full step. For the first time that night, Damien looked surprised. Then the shadows near the arena wall shifted, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the phantom of doubt in a broken window across the street. It had the same face shape as Marcus, but its edges were smoky and unfinished, and its glowing, empty eyes seemed to watch him from another world. It appeared whenever pressure grew too heavy, and it fed on the old fear that Marcus would become just another fighter owned by other people. The phantom did not speak with a mouth. It spoke through memories, through the flash of every mistake, and through the sudden thought that maybe Marcus could never break free. Marcus felt that cold pull for one breath, and then Frank's voice cut through it from the side. "Keep your feet. Keep your name." Those words landed like a hand on his back, and Marcus came back to himself. He turned from the reflection and drove forward again. This time, he did not chase Damien in anger. He moved with purpose, cutting off angles, forcing Damien to retreat toward the streetlight where the crowd could see every heavy breath and every failed plan. Victor's calm smile began to fade. He had expected control, and control was slipping. Sharon saw the shift at once, and she tried to bend the story in real time. She raised her notebook, shouted questions about Marcus's temper, and told the crowd he was losing control because he could not handle pressure. Her words spread quickly because people love a simple story, and she knew how to make a lie sound useful. Lena heard the noise, stepped forward, and told Eddie to stay ready. She then lifted her voice and called out the truth in plain words. Marcus was not out of control. He was being pushed, trapped, and tested by people who wanted to use him. That statement changed the mood around the ring barrier. Some in the crowd started to look at Victor instead of Marcus. Others looked at the white folder in Victor's hand because the contract packet was now impossible to ignore. Frank moved closer to Lena and spoke in a low voice, and the two of them understood the same thing without needing more words. Victor had not only built this fight around money. He had built it around public pressure so he could claim Marcus was difficult if he refused the deal. The contract was his trap, and the crowd was part of it. That was the twist Marcus had been feeling all night without fully naming it. He had not just been fighting an opponent. He had been fighting a system that wanted him tired, confused, and signed before he could think clearly. Damien came in again, harder now because he could feel his own role slipping away. He tried to crowd Marcus, pin him near the wet curb, and turn the whole street into a wall. Marcus answered with steady footwork and sharp body movement, slipping one heavy swing and returning with a fast counter that made Damien stagger back into the light. The exchange was brutal in effort but clean in outcome, and the crowd rose with every move. Victor finally stepped closer, lifting the boxing contract packet so Marcus could see it between them. He said Marcus could end the night right now if he signed, because the money, the rematch, and the public praise would all follow. He said Frank and Lena could not protect him forever. He said the crowd would forget any trouble if he gave them a champion to cheer for. Marcus looked at the folder, then at Victor, and then at the people who mattered most. He saw Frank's calm concern, Lena's fierce protection, and Eddie's ready stance. He also saw, in the wet reflection at his feet, the phantom of doubt waiting for him to choose fear. For one long second, it seemed as if the whole street had gone silent beneath the neon glow. Then Marcus lowered his hands just enough to take a breath, and when he raised them again, his face was different. The confident smile returned, but now it carried choice instead of pride. He told Victor in clear words that he would not be owned, not by papers, not by lies, and not by fear. Victor's polished smile broke for the first time. He signaled Damien to finish the pressure, but Damien was already losing his rhythm because Marcus had stopped reacting like prey. Marcus stepped in with a sharp, clean burst, not wild and not cruel, but precise enough to turn Damien's momentum aside. Damien swung wide, slipped on the wet pavement, and crashed to one knee before catching himself on his glove. The crowd gasped, then surged into cheers as Marcus stood over the line of light, breathing steady, guard up, and fully awake inside his own life. Frank blew a short whistle, not to stop the match, but to mark the change he had been waiting for. Lena exhaled because her brother was still standing on his own terms. Eddie grinned with relief, even while keeping his eyes on Victor. Sharon kept writing, but now her page was not giving her the story she wanted. She was watching a man refuse to be shaped by the system around him, and that truth was harder to twist than any punch. Yet the night was not done. Victor still held the contract packet. Damien was still in the ring. And somewhere in the broken reflections, the phantom of doubt had not vanished. It had only stepped back into the dark, waiting for the next chance to speak. Marcus looked toward the shadows, then toward his family, and he understood that this round was only one part of a much larger fight. He had not won everything. He had only proven that he could no longer be controlled so easily. The bell sounded again across the street, deep and final for the round, and as the crowd kept moving, Marcus stayed in the light, ready for whatever came next. Night still hung over Arena Street, and the wet pavement shone under broken neon signs. The crowd was thinning now, but the air still felt tight because Marcus Vale had not finished his fight against fear. He stood in his colorful trunks and hand wraps, with Frank Monroe beside him, Lena Vale watching every shadow, and Eddie Cole keeping close with worried eyes. Victor Shaw stayed near the curb with a polished smile, while Sharon Pike wrote fast in her notebook, eager to turn pain into headlines. Marcus could feel the phantom of doubt behind him, not in a body but in the dark corners of every window. It wanted him to believe that one strong round did not matter, that Victor still owned his future, and that his family would soon be dragged into the same trap. That trap was the contract packet in Victor's hand, thick white papers filled with rules that would drain Marcus's choices and lock him into Victor's control. If Marcus signed, his wins would no longer belong to him. Frank stepped forward first, calm and steady, and told Marcus that a fighter wins by seeing straight when the room grows cold. Lena added that strength meant choosing your own name, not just throwing punches. Then Eddie pointed toward the arena doors where Damien Cross stood waiting inside, silent and rigid, ready for the final public round. Victor smiled wider because he wanted Marcus to walk in afraid, bend to pressure, and make the whole city think Marcus had broken. But Marcus looked at his family, then at the dark glass across the street, and he finally understood the truth. The phantom of doubt was not a curse at all. It was the part of him that grew loud every time he listened to Victor, and it shrank every time he chose himself. Marcus stepped forward, lifted his chin, and told Victor to keep the contract. He would fight Damien, but on his own terms. Victor's smile slipped for the first time, and Sharon stopped writing because the story they wanted no longer fit the truth. Marcus walked into the arena with Frank, Lena, and Eddie behind him, not as a boy trying to prove worth, but as a man who already knew it. The phantom stayed in the dark, weaker now, and Marcus stayed in the light, ready for the final bell and the life that waited after it.